Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we recognize you as who you are and all things. And Lord, we just ask that you be present with us tonight and guide our thoughts and our words. And Lord, that our actions will be the best thing possible for our community. In Jesus' name I pray.
I now call the meeting of January 12th, the Planning Commission to order, and a roll call, Mr. Pope.
Mr. Walter Robinson.
Here.
Mr. Jeff Robinson.
Here.
Mr. Lofton Allen.
Here.
Mr. Stephen Allen. Ms. Florence Rhodes.
Here.
Mr. William Kane.
Here.
Ms. Annie Oden.
Here.
Ms. Kim Wiley.
Here.
Mr. Joe Willie Ford.
Okay. First thing on the meeting tonight is the election of officers. We need to elect the chairman.
All right, we'll open the floor for nominations for chairman for the 2021 Planning Commission. Floor is open.
I'd like to nominate Walter Robinson.
I have a motion and a second to nominate Mr. Walter Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Turn it back over to you, Mr. Robinson.
All right. The second item is vice chairman. Motion. The floor is now open for nomination for vice chairman.
A second.
All right, we have a motion and second for Jeff Robinson to be vice chairman again. Any other nomination? Can have nomination be closed? Hearing none, we only have one candidate then. I assume you already voted. Everybody in favor of Vice Chairman Robinson, say aye. Aye. Thank you. That again. Secretary.
I guess we nominate Lynn Pope.
Surprise, surprise. All right.
I'll second that.
We have a motion on the floor in a second for Secretary Mr. Pope. Since we already voted, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. We have our chairman, vice chairman, and secretary again. Next thing is approval of the agenda. You have it in front of you. I need the additional items to the agenda.
So items to add, yes, sir.
I can have a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Got a second for that?
Second.
A motion and a second. Assume everybody ready to vote, say aye.
Aye.
Motion. The agenda is approved. Next item is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. I saw them a minute ago. Anybody, the only thing I saw was that, down about item 2, it said, that Vice Chairman Robinson entertained a motion to approve the minutes of September 9th. I was here. I don't think, did you do that?
I read the same thing.
I don't know. It don't bother me at all. I think that's a typo. Anybody else see anything else that jumped out? Hearing nothing else, I assume we're ready to approve the minutes of the December 8th meeting. I have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
We got a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Motion is a second on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote to approve the minutes of December 8th. Everybody say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved with one little correction. All right. We need a motion to go into public hearing to hear CTA-2-20.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second to go into public hearing? Motion and a second. All in favor of going in public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
We're ready in public hearing. Mr. Pope?
Okay, as you recall, we were supposed to have this zoning text amendment case last month, but due to some problems with our local mailing system, we had to postpone it to this month. The applicant is Joseph Carroll Jr. He's representing NR3 LLC, and he's wishing to amend the zoning ordinance to allow the use of a natural resource recovery, refining, and recycling facility within an enclosed building to be a use that's allowed by special use permit within the A1 agricultural district. Staff has developed a definition for the natural resource recovery, refining, and recycling facility that you'll see in the staff report. There would also be added to chapter 23 the definitions of in these zoning ordinance. Excuse me. The type of facility Mr. Carroll wishes to establish is a agricultural recycling facility in which they will extract the methane gas from agricultural waste products and inject into the pipeline skippers, the gas pipeline skippers. It'll all be within an enclosed building. The products will come in. We'll get into more detail when we get to special use permit, but I want to give you an overview of how this request is being made. All of the waste products will be dried in their facility down in Duplin County, North Carolina. They'll be trucked in enclosed containers and offloaded within the enclosed building, and then they'll go through the process to extract the methane gas to inject in the gas line. Then you end up with a byproduct. They call it biochar. It looks like a lime pellet, and it can be used for soil amendments on the cropland or anything, as a matter of fact. But anyway, before we can go through the special use permit process, this use needs to be added to table 4.1 of the permitted use table. And staff is recommending that we add this use, which requires a special use permit. It will not be allowed by right, but like go through the special use permitting process. So staff will entertain any questions that anybody might have at this time concerning the text amendment.
I just got this. So where's the building we have to, where's the address of the building we talked about?
Spring Church Road.
I know what it is.
I can't.
I said, I know what it is. I just got it in front of my face.
I know, and nobody got their package through it. They got here today. We'll have to start in delivering these packages because the mail service is not coming through for us. It's right at the state line, at Spring Church
I
Road.
know. My social service package was mailed on November 11th. I got it in the mail today, on January 11th.
Oh, my Lord.
Yes. We'll start hand delivering, just so you know, start next month.
We want to hear from the applicant next.
Yes.
I'm assuming this is Mr. Carroll. You want to speak to us now about this, the applicant?
Sure.
Okay. Maybe we'll have more questions when you finish.
Well, thank you all for taking the time to listen to the project here. I thought, and Lynn, I apologize, I thought maybe everybody had a chance before to familiarize themselves with the package. So, I thought maybe we would just entertain questions. But what I'll do is I'll kind of give you a general overview of what we're doing, and then y'all can feel free to stop me, jump in, ask questions. But in general, the other handout that is outside the packet, this is just a little larger illustration of what we're doing, and sometimes it's a little easier to see print it out. But really what we're doing is we're taking all types of agricultural waste, both crop waste, swine waste, we can use chicken litter, any of those, we mix them together and we dry them out. We've actually got sample over there, which, believe it or not, does not have an odor to it. Once it's dried out, it really does not, it really smells just like dirt or anything else. So we are collecting that waste in any agricultural setting. Some of it is down in North Carolina. Now, what we hope to do is also collect it in Southern Virginia. We could go all the way out to the eastern shore, but we'll sort of take a radius around that plant. We'll collect the agricultural waste, we'll dry it.
Mr. Carroll, can I grab that sample and let's pass it?
Sure, sure.
If you don't mind. I'll grab it.
Yeah, I'm sure you would put this together, but the one that looks like it's got some hay in there or straw, that is the dry material that comes in. That black material, that's the biochar. It comes out the other end of the process.
This is the finished product?
That's the finished product. So that's a byproduct. So we're going to create two things. One, we're going to create a biogas, which we're going to inject directly into the natural gas pipeline. Then we also create this biochar, which actually captures all of the residual nutrients, metals, minerals, and carbon. And then that's used as a soil amendment. It will actually act as a catalyst for composting. It can be used for the crop plant. It actually has an NPK to it. So it actually carries that nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium with it. And that can be used on other crop plants. So we get 100% recycling of the whole process. So the plan is that we needed, and the reason that we came to the site that we did is that property actually intersects the pipeline easement. So we can tap into the Transco pipeline, and once we get our gas in there, we can either keep that in Virginia, we can send it to North Carolina, or we can send it anywhere else in the country that we want to send it. So that's why that particular piece of property was of such interest to us. There's also the opportunity for us to come in there and really not disrupt. There is one house that is at the beginning of the driveway as we come in, but other than that, it's fairly unintrusive, and we will keep a tree line buffer all the way around the property, which one will inhibit any line of sight. And as Lynn mentioned, all of this is going to be in sort of a conventional metal farm building, the kind that you all see. This will be a long metal farm building, in which you'll see what we've laid out here, the plant that we have right now. The process actually goes into U-shape, as you can see. It kind of goes, you're putting the agricultural waste in one end, you're making the biochar, and the gas is coming out, so it's really making a U-shape. What we're going to do is just stretch that out. So instead of being a U-shape, it's going to be in a straight line. And if you flip all the way to the back of that package, you'll see sort of an architectural rendering of what that will look like. That's the blue colored demonstration. And if you can imagine that with a building over top of it, we would just have the trucks coming in with the waste, covered trucks with the waste. The truck would back up, it would dump it into a hopper. That would then be processed. It would make the gas would go to the pipeline, the carbon would go into another container, and then that carbon would be hauled off as they fill up. You get about a 70% reduction in volume, so that the black char that you saw there, that's roughly the proportion of what you would put in and what you would get out. So we would be backhauling with the same trucks that brought in the product. So that way we can sort of minimize traffic that way too. So it's not the technology itself is complicated, but the process is not all that complicated. And I think that the way that we've tried to configure this, we would end up on that initial phase, if we're successful, we would have about 6 trucks a day coming in and out of there. If we were very successful and we could manage to get waste from other places, that might increase in time, but nothing dramatic. I mean, we don't anticipate a huge increase in traffic. So, I don't know. Other than that, it's not. There's not a lot of other infrastructure that needs to go in there. There's not a lot of alteration to the site. So I don't know if there were any specific questions, which I'm happy to answer or go into more detail on any aspect that may be of interest. Anyway.
So what would the square footage be of the building that you cut up? How large of the building?
That building, the one I'm thinking, if we have about 6, it's probably gonna be, I would guess, and it's gonna be longer, it's gonna be sort of rectangular. So I would guess that that's probably gonna be, about 30,000 square feet. So if you can imagine, it would just be a bunch of bays where the trucks would just back up and then they would all go on one side, gas pipeline would run down the other side and go down to the pipeline injection point, which would be down where the pipeline easement is. It's down to the lowest elevation, it's right before it gets to the swamp.
Exactly. And you would be in operation, did I read somewhere, 24/7? 24 hours a day?
So the plant itself runs 24/7. We don't have trucks coming in 24/7. We would keep the trucks coming in and out during normal business hours. And then the plant just runs sort of continuously. It's back up. It's walking floor trailers. So they're just sort of regulated so that they'll continuously feed the system and the system continuously makes gas and that gets injected into the pipeline. And there's probably going to be 3 to 5 employees around. I mean, that's not counting maybe a guy coming in, a truck driver or something like that. But just on hand, you're probably going to have between 3 and 5 people there, for what we're anticipating right now.
You had said that you plan to use some manure and so forth. How about the animals from the hog farms? The dead animals?
No, we don't use any mortality. We don't take the mortality. There are other plants that do that, but there's a whole lot of reasons, but that's not part of our process. We're really just taking the solids and we use bedding material. So we're really kind of going back to the way they used to do it, where you have the bedding and the door, and that's how we capture it, and that's dried out, and you saw what it looks like. That's put in the truck, and we just truck that up here to dry material.
I'm just sitting here thinking that kind of material would normally be generated in a dairy. If you're in an area that had lots of dairies, I can see all this being generated, but in this area, there's not a dairy within 75 miles.
No, we do. Our system works for dairy, it works for chicken, it works for swine. Most of the material around here is going to come from swine. There are several hog farms on the Virginia side of the line. There's several that are kind of right there on the North Carolina-Virginia border. And then obviously, as you go south into North Carolina, you get pretty high density down there. We can also take a lot of the cover crop residual. And we're finding, I didn't realize there was so much of that around, but a lot of the hay and the straw is kind of going to waste. We can use that too for bedding. So we will even take some of the row crop residual from some of the farmers. So we can use a lot of the whole agricultural waste spectrum mixed together.
Where does the byproduct go?
I'm sorry?
Where does the byproduct go?
That byproduct, well, the gas goes right into the pipeline. So we inject that. That carbon product, we found a lot of different uses for it, which is very interesting. One of them is it will act as a catalyst in composting. So if we take other ag waste and add that to it, that will actually help that whole composting process, and then we come up with a very rich, fertile compost that can then be used as topsoil. And the benefit of that is inert. So there's no microbial activity in that char because you're taking it up to such a high heat. When we put it back into the compost, it actually creates an environment for all those microbes. It creates a really nice compost, which then we can then turn around and sell to the local farming community or whomever else. A lot of times, we've got an abundance of nutrients from sort of the intensive animal agriculture, but as you move out into the western part of the state, it really is very beneficial. So we're finding a good commercial reuse for it. And that product, as you can tell, it's very dense, so it's easy for us to ship.
No products going to the landfill, right?
Nothing goes to the landfill. It's 100% of what comes in is recycled into a commercially viable product. It's either going to be gas or it's going to be the biochar. So biogas or biochar. That's the only two things that we end up with.
But you ship, the biochar back to North Carolina? Back to-
We will ship it wherever people want to use it. If people want to use it locally.
But I'm saying it's not stored, it wouldn't be stored on the regional site. It
There would be no reason for us to store it other than just, the temporary storage we get a tractor, until we get a trailer load, and then we're getting it out of there because it should have a home somewhere else. We're selling that like everything else.
So you are selling it from that site. You're not taking it back to Duval County and packaging it and then sending it.
Right this minute, our plan is it's being used in sort of a super sack type of, we have one large user who will buy it from us right now. We have others that have proposed some sort of commercial bagging operations where you could have it in more 50-pound bags and sell it at Lowe's or Home Depot, something like that. Right now, it's, we're not really in the marketing business, so we're just as happy to sell it in super sacks to people that will eventually, they're actually turning to compost. They're putting the compost in 50-pound bags. And then they're selling that because it's living soil. This is more, and this is very expensive. This is much more than you want to pay for at Home Depot. So it's better. So what they do is they mix it in with other products and come up with a retail type product.
Yeah, I mean, what I was just getting at is that would this facility, again, be storing it for an extended period of time, or would it be, again, moved back out?
No,
You don't have any storage capability.
our plan is just to move it out. We don't plan to have any storage out there on site. Either way, we either move it off to another bagging facility somewhere else, or we'd send it to the end user. But no, we would not have storage facilities there.
My question, is there any damage to the environment? Do we have any water coming from it or any environmental concerns?
No, and that was really the whole nature of the technology. Was the interesting part about it, as you'll notice, or probably would notice since we pointed out, there's no smokestack. We have zero emissions. There's actually no air emissions from the system. And then we do 100% beneficial reuse, meaning that we're getting 100% recycling of all the material we put in. All the material is 100% organic. We're not adding any chemicals, we're not adding any catalysts. So we are a very environmentally friendly process. And that's part of the benefit, and that's why some of our products are getting added value to them, because they're 100% organic and they need a lot of the other where food comes from. All the organic farmers can use the product because there's no commercial fertilizers in there, there's no chemical fertilizers. So yes, we are a very environmentally friendly operation.
Your plant in June, you already have another plant, just like this, but you convert it to electricity?
Yes, the difference on that one is rather than injecting into the pipeline, that gas goes into a genset where that biogas then drives a turbine engine, which creates the electricity, and then we put the electricity back on the grid. So it just turns out that's not a very efficient way to do it. So Duke Power was buying the energy down there, and they decided that they preferred the pipeline injection because they can convert that much more efficiently at the big combined cycle plants. We were just losing a lot of efficiency by trying to do it in the 1 megawatt gen sets. So and to get into the pipeline is a little bit tricky because North Carolina, they operate under this what's called Henshaw exemption. So all of their gas technically stays in North Carolina. So it makes it very hard to operate a facility like this because you can't move the gas anywhere other than North Carolina. By locating where we're located here, we can really move the gas into Virginia. And one of the environmental benefits, there's something called, as you probably all know, is a renewable energy certificate, which is with the new Virginia Clean Economy Act. That REC is actually the only remedy if you don't meet those requirements. One of the only remedies for not meeting those requirements is to buy RECs. We can actually create RECs at this plant, and they will count in the state of Virginia. So at some point in the future, as that all materializes, because of our location, we would be able to create those credits for businesses in Virginia who needed them to comply with new rules and regulations.
So that's your whole premise of having to haul the waste out of North Carolina because of the pipeline issue.
Yes, I mean, one, there's a lot of waste in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Two, we will take waste from Virginia, we take waste from North Carolina. I believe if it's like North Carolina, Virginia will require us, if they're going to generate RECs, they will ask us to use waste from Virginia, which is fine. We'll use it from Virginia, and we can keep track of that pretty easily because the way it comes in these trailers. So we basically barcode the trailer, and we'll know this trailer came from this farm in Virginia, this trailer came from this farm in North Carolina. So then we can we know exactly where they call them environmental attributes, but where those RECs were generated. That we've got North Carolina, we've got Virginia. So that having that site right there on the state line gives us that flexibility to serve both sides of the border.
So most of the gas coming from Smithville and Duplin County and in your surrounding areas, you're getting it mostly from the Smithville pipeline.
There's some, and then if you'll notice, there's a lot of, now some of the farms are Smithfield, some of them are Prestige, some of them are just independent operators. It comes from all over, but there's a number of farms that are actually just south of the border, and then there's a couple of Virginia, that we'll try and source material from there too. And in those instances, we would actually dry on the farm. We wouldn't take it back down to Duplin County to dry it because, believe it or not, it really just air dries. We end up just creating these big cement pads, and we use the bedding, we air dry it, and we pick it up and move it. So when we do it in Virginia, we do the same thing. We just come up with agreements with the farmers, and we come and collect it. So it's.
So instead of going into a lagoon, you were just going to.
The idea is to stop it from going to the lagoon. Now, some of that, we can't, that's really government rules and regulations that are going to change that. Some of the farmers are going to a bedded system because they can then get certification from where food comes from and Global Animal Project, and then they can sell their pork at Fresh Market for a much higher dollar. So we are seeing some farmers, and we work with them where we come and collect that right off their floor. So they actually go to a bedded system where they just have a big slab, and then they have bedding there. We clean out the bedding, and just like a poultry house, we take the bedding. And that's really our preference. We'd like to see the whole industry move in that direction, but we can't really orchestrate that, or we're not the ones that can regulate that, but we can certainly help facilitate it.
It's one of the things that's awful lot of smell when you bring the human in.
Well, if you, that's the same stuff we're bringing in,
That's
and
only a little bit, right?
that's a little bit, and,
But by the time I live, half a mile from the field farm, you could say they're doing it like.
oh, yeah, 100%, yeah, the chicken litter is worse than the swine waste, and I never really thought that I would become an expert in animal waste odor, but,
Don't take care
we can take chicken litter. We can do it now. The chicken litter actually we have to make some adjustments because it has a lot more ammonia. So we have to adjust on the front end to accommodate the ammonia, but we can do that. We have worked with that swine waste for quite a while, and what's interesting is one of the reasons that doesn't smell as bad. It's all relative. But a lot of the lagoons, when they clean them out, they use polymers to try and get that waste out. And the polymer doesn't release the water and it doesn't release the ammonia. And it took us a while to figure this out, and that's what smells so bad. When we just take that out of the lagoon or out of the house and we just air dry it really ends up, most of the odor goes away, but most of the energy stays in it, which, you know, we found that out through trial and error, but, and when it comes in, we're gonna have an enclosed trucks anyway. So when you walk before trailers covered, they back up to the dock, so we're not gonna have big stockpiles of waste out in the yard anyway.
How much liquid comes in with it?
Really, no, we don't really want to transport water.
I just think so.
Costs us too much money. So we try and get it down. That, what you're seeing there is about 25% moisture. And that's kind of right about where we want to, it keeps it, if it gets dry, now it starts flying away. So we try and keep it right around that 20-25% moisture, which keeps it in the trucks and easy to handle.
And then you get the swine waste out of the lagoons? Or
We take it, you can take it from the lagoon. Our preference is, and what we're hoping the regulators will do, is force people to go to interceptor pits. And the interceptor pit is just a liquid solid separator. So it'll capture most of those solids in a big cement ball. We'll come around and collect that with a back truck. And then we take it to a drying facility. And we really just spread it out on big concrete slabs with bedding and let it air dry. And then we scoop it all back up, put it in the truck, and chuck it up.
So I might have missed that. You're saying that in theory, you will get the waste from the house farm. Correct. To a drying facility.
Correct.
And then after it's somewhat dry, you go bring it to this one.
We're gonna get it as dry as that. We want it to be as dry as possible, well, not as dry as possible. We say once it gets below about 25%, it starts to fly away. It gets airborne. So we try and keep it right about 20-25% moisture. And that's dry to touch. People think that's dry, but it actually has about 20-25% moisture. So we do not, if we're moving liquid, that was a mistake. We're not trying to move liquid. That costs us money.
So where is your drying facility that would be feeding this plant?
Some are in Duplin County, some are actually on the farms. And then we have our plant, where we have a slab there, we use that. So for instance, if we were gonna come and work with a farm up in Virginia, depending upon how big the farm is, they might be big enough that we could put a slab right there and use that slab. Or, you know, they may have 2 or 3 farms that are close by, and all of them want to, you know, pick a place and have one slab and we do it there. So it's really just whatever is geographically desirable. You know, we're trying not to move the wet waste too far because that costs us a lot of money.
So this picture that you have in your information, this indoor manure drying barn, is that your typical process?
That one is a picture of a barn that we would, one like that we use, that's actually on a dairy farm. Ours will actually be, we're not gonna go with the cloth building. When we get to that size, it's actually cheaper for us to just use the permanent metal building. We found out from the manufacturers of that particular building, that most of the time, the reason they make one that big is because it gets around the permanent structure zoning regulation. So we're not really bound by that. We would just use your typical metal farm building, and it would be essentially the same.
Is your facility in Dublin?
Duplin, yes.
Is it existing now? It's in operation, the drying facility?
That one, yes, there is a small drying pad there. That's only a single unit. When we come up here, we would go with 6 units. So there is one in Duplin County, and that one is operating. And then we've also used, we actually can dry just on the ground. But it's much more efficient on a pad. All this we're kind of learning. We've learned over the last 3 years by trial and error. But there is one in Duplin County. It is operating. That's the one that goes to electric rather than gas.
How many employees will you anticipate having here once you, if this gets going?
We anticipate about 3 to 5 per shift, and we would really, you probably have about 3 on the overnight shifts, 5 during the day. And really, at night, there'd be minimal activity. It would just really be keeping the feedstock moving into the machines. All the deliveries would be taking place during the day, during normal business hours.
I may have missed something. When Jeff asked you a question, I wasn't sure. Are you saying that you will not, like you don't anticipate having a drying floor at this site?
No, we wouldn't have a drying floor here. We wouldn't be bringing in any wet material. As it comes into the trucks, it'll be drying in the trucks before we remove it.
I guess I'm trying to understand your process. What's advantageous about you drying in Duplin? Why is that significant in your process?
It's the trucking cost. So we can get it dry, and then when we bring it up here, when we go into this process, it runs off electricity. And the less moisture we have in there, the less electricity it takes to make it into that carbon char to turn it into gas. So if we bring it up here and it's wet, that costs us a lot of money because it costs us a lot of electricity. And it turns out the most efficient way to dry it is air dry. So what makes the most sense is to dry it before you transport it. Now, if there was a pipeline right next to the farm, that would be perfect.
So that's why you're drying there, because it's over a 2-hour drive.
Yeah, 100%. And because you can't get into the pipeline, it's very difficult to find a pipeline injection point that's accessible. And that's what you need. So you really have to bring, we could either, because what we thought about doing was making the gas down there, putting it in 2 trucks and having those trucks come up and deliver the gas into the pipeline or somewhere else in the pipeline. It turns out that you spend so much in compressing that gas and getting it into the trucks, it just becomes cost prohibitive. So economically, it made more sense for us to dry the material, bring the material here, and then process it. And as it turns into gas, put it directly into the pipeline. So it was just really an economic decision. But you're right. In a perfect world, you'd have the farm right next to the pipeline, and you wouldn't be moving. You would just take it out here and you dry it out and feed it into our system and put it in the pipeline. But most of the time, the pipelines are running through. This was a unique opportunity where that pipeline actually goes, it runs across the bottom of Alden Turner's land down there. So we were able to inject right into the pipeline off of his property. So you are right there. It wouldn't make any sense unless you had to get to the pipeline.
Any more questions from anyone?
And I guess this is a little different because we're doing 2 things at the same time tonight.
Right.
But I've got a bunch of questions about the land use part of this. I guess I should say that to the SUP part.
You can, when I get to do my SUP staff report, I think his comments will be the same as what you just heard. He explained the whole process, but it's up to you, Jeff, if you want to go over those now or wait till I've got. I think it'd be beneficial to do staff report, so everybody get to hear it first. And
I think so too.
Then we can have discussion.
I think so.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll wait till after.
Okay. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Still in the public hearing. SP-9-20.
Okay, again, the applicant is NR3 LLC, represented by Mr. Joseph Carroll. The property owner is Alden Turner. The total acreage of all the properties is 212 acres. It's It's located on Spring Church Road near the Northampton County line in North Carolina. The existing zoning is A1 agricultural. Adjacent property is A1 agricultural. The existing use of the property is agricultural, forestry, and residential. Mr. Carroll is requesting to get a special use permit for the establishment of a natural resource recovery and recycling facility, a lot of ours. There's been some previous zoning activity, deserved zoning activity, CTA 2-20. Prior to that, there was a subdivision established there, I would say probably 10 to 12 years ago. When we look at the character of the area, it's low density residential, forestry, and agricultural. When you look at the Greenville County comp plan, this property is located outside of the urban service area. It's located within an agricultural and forestal area on the rural development area map. It's located in a low density residential area on the future land use map. Excuse me. As I stated earlier, the applicant wishes to construct this recycling facility within an enclosed building on 17 parcels consisting of 212 acres. 16 of these parcels are part of a residential subdivision that was created in 2005. There's currently one residential single-family dwelling that is built on adjacent lot in the subdivision. There's also a gas transmission line located upon the subject property in which the applicant wishes to interconnect to. The project involves constructing an enclosed building and install, I had a typo, it should be 6 units to process agricultural waste and extract gas, which in turn will be injected into the gas line. Agricultural waste products and manure will be driven to their facility in Duke, North Carolina, or will be dried on the farms that they obtain the waste products from. No products will be they'll be dried prior to transported to the Piney Wood site. The dried manure will be loaded into covered trucks in Duke County and then unloaded from covered cedar bin in the Piney Wood site. Once this methane gas is extracted, the byproduct produced, which is the biochar, consent of, is a product that is used as a soil amendment that is embedded with carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other micronutrients. When we look at the adjacent and surrounding uses, like I said, there's one single family dwelling that is located within the subdivision that was established in 2005. When you cross the line into North Carolina, there's 3 or 4 residential dwellings right below the project site. In the remainder of the area is agricultural and forestry. I included excerpts from the comprehensive plan. Some of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan is to preserve the rural character of the county by directing and controlling growth in designated areas, to encourage new development complement surrounding uses, concentrate development in appropriate locations, by encouraging more efficient site design and incorporating proper buffers. I did put residential goals and objectives to promote housing development areas and service for public water and sewer, which that subdivision there does have public water. The county tied into Northampton County's water system and extended public water to that neighborhood. And we want to prevent the encroachment of conflicting land uses on existing viable neighborhoods. When we look at the land use plan, you'll see that the property, the land use plan illustrated on the future land use map depicts the general use concepts for the county. The purpose of this plan is to recommend the orderly development of the county. In most cases, different land uses are kept separate from each other. The trend of multi-use designations applies mainly to urbanized areas, not rural or suburban areas. When we look at the recommended land uses in the land use plan, we have the rural residential conservation area, which is is characterized by low-density residential development such as detached single-family dwellings on larger lots, and certain agricultural farming uses are typically allowed. In addition, large-scale economic development projects may be allowed subject to required use approvals approved by the board of supervisors. The residential uses in this area states the primary goal of the land use plan is to guide future development in a manner that preserves the overall character of the county, providing adequate housing, services, facilities, and amenities to the residents. The industrial, manufacturing, and wholesale trade portion of the future land use plan talks about areas surrounding this existing industrial park, ideal locations for future industrial growth. This park offers easy access to 95 and Route 58. It's also, we have the local enterprise zone. Staff is analyzed this project as proposed natural resource recycling facility is the first of its type in Grissom County. Will convert an approved residential subdivision, if approved, to an industrial use, thus potentially impacting the rural character of the area. If this presents a problem, the applicant is advised that the proposed facility can be located so that it sits entirely on the large parcel, which is parcel 49, thus preserving the residential subdivision lots. The proposed project abuts single-family. The proposed project abuts a single-family residential use in the rural development area, thus if approved, proper setbacks and buffer will be necessary to mitigate any impacts to the surrounding properties and the property owners. The applicant chose this project for the location of the project due to the proximity to the gas line that intersects the property. The applicant materials, the applicant states that the project is designed to minimize any odors associated with the recycling process by driving the waste off-site, then delivering the waste products in enclosed containers, and offloading the product into an enclosed field. The applicant is currently applying for a zoning text amendment, which just heard at the staff report, that would allow this natural resource recovery refining facility established with a special use permit in the A1 agricultural district. If the planning commission determines that the applicant furthers the comprehensive plan's goals and objectives, and that it meets the criteria set forth in zoning ordinance, staff recommends the following conditions to mitigate the adverse effects of this refinement and recycling operation. The subdivision plan for lots 2 through 17 should be vacated. The applicant is responsible, of course, for obtaining all local, state, and federal permits. Special attention given to the Grissom County Stormwater Management Permit, Erosion Control Permit, and VDOT land use permits. Condition number 4, the drying process required for swine and poultry manure cannot occur on the subject site in Grissom County. Must occur at the applicant's facility in Duplin County or at another approved facility separate from the site, which is the basis of this application. There can be no outside storage of dry manure or other ag waste products on the site. Agricultural waste brought to the site must be transported and covered in closed containers. The applicant must obtain a land use permit from VDOT for the commercial interest of the site. The applicant must maintain a 50-foot vegetative buffer around the facility. The applicant should install permanent security fencing, at least 6 foot high, with 3 strands of barbed wire. Any on-site light provided for the operational phase of the facility shall be dark sky compliant, shielded away from adjacent properties, and positioned downward to minimize light spillage onto adjacent properties. Daytime noises will be under 67 decibels. Permanent access roads and parking areas will be stabilized with gravel, asphalt, concrete to minimize dust and impacts to adjacent properties. If the facility is not established within a 2-year period, or the operation of the facility lasts for a 2-year period. Special use permit was done over. Do I have any questions concerning the staff report on the conditions, recommended conditions?
Any questions? We vote. I see we have some visitors over there. Does anyone want to speak during the public hearing for this? Yes, ma'am, come on up. Just state your name for the record.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Covington. I am the owner of the property on 91 Spring Church Road. I just wanted to come to voice some concerns, because I had two different, propositions or what's supposed to be built on Spring Church Road. I'm not sure if it's in conjunction with the Natural Resource Center or not, but I just wanted to come to, because I have that property, I guess, that's causing the issue. The letter I received is for a solar plant or a solar farm to come, and it made mention of the Natural Resource Center that would be east of it. And I listened to everything that was said, but it was pretty much describing the same land that's behind the house. And so some of the concerns have already been addressed in reference to the traffic, I guess environmental concerns. But I guess going by the letter I received is a lot different from what I heard tonight. I've also, this letter that I received said it would be more than 3,000 truckloads coming in and out of that area. It would be working 24 hours a day. They didn't really mention how many people or personnel would be working or anything like that, but they did offer to buy my home, I guess, to prevent me from being affected from all the traffic going in and out of what effects this business will bring. So I've overheard everything that has been said about the Natural Resource Center, but I just wanted to make sure, is this two different businesses coming, or is it one of the same?
One of the natural, I don't think a lot, it's just a natural resource.
Okay, so I have a letter from,
We had letters for like for another project, to a solar project, it could have been a big something when they started implementing.
okay,
One behind your, you the house right there, actually.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The natural resource recycling center is the only project in that area.
it's the only one. Okay,
And
so
then
this is
I
letter, this,
believe that was the letter, I think Alden sent that letter to Ms. Covington.
Oh, okay.
And I think he referenced the solar and our project in the same letter. Yes, ma'am.
That's not the letter you got from me.
No, it was, I think
Okay.
Alden had sent that letter.
Good word. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's just this Friday.
The letter you got was from Alvin Carter, not the county, right?
yes.
Oh, okay, I thought you told me the letter we sent.
No, I got the letter you sent about the natural resource.
That's all this, yeah, correct. I
This
don't
is
know
what I-
anything, I haven't talked to anybody about it. So,
Okay, so this is what I received Friday, so I just wanted to make sure, is this two different businesses coming, or are they in conjunction with each other? Because what, the six truckloads and stuff, that doesn't really bother me, especially after it's already been discussed that it won't change the environment or,
could I see the letter? I haven't
Yes, sir.
seen the letter. Apparently he assigned a lease for a solar farm. Nobody has made an application
okay. So
in
is
that
this,
area. The only ones we have in the Pine Log Road and what you see on Rock Ridge Road, solar farms.
okay, so is this,
So it might be a developer out there looking for a solar project on that property. but nobody's made an application to the county for solar farm on that property.
And so this is two totally different.
Totally different.
That's two different things. The only thing we're talking about tonight is just them
Okay,
project here.
okay, but they were describing the same land, that's why I.
It may be it, but the only thing we're talking about tonight is this project.
Okay. I guess that's pretty much, all of my questions that I had pretty much have been addressed already. I just wanted to ask, like again, which adjacent property, is it the land directly behind my house, or is it the land like across from it?
To the right-hand side.
I've got it now, I'll show you.
Okay. And the traffic has already been discussed, and he said it would be, what, six?
It should be about 6 trucks a day during the week.
Okay. And it's not gonna change the construction of the land, and you keep the tree line, so it wouldn't be like visible to me like I'm right beside it.
So what we would try to do is on your property, keep a tree buffer between your property and what we're doing, and then keep a buffer along that road as well.
Okay, okay. That's fine.
The other gas line, this, the gas line. and the- I'll give you all this.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And the other question had already been asked about the environmental concerns, in reference to the chemicals, like, hazard materials. And how long it would take, I think 2 years was referenced, and it would be like a 2-year before what he just mentioned.
Oh, how long it would take us to
build it
begin
and-
permit, how long it would take us to begin construction? I think Lynn was just saying we had to begin construction of the facility within 2 years.
We put a 2-year clause in because
Okay,
they never do anything. We don't want somebody coming back 10 or 15 years later with a special use permit, so it's kind of a sunset clause if they don't begin the process.
okay, and I just wanted to ask that because of the letter I received, and they wanted to buy my home, and it was kind of like an urgency. So I didn't want to feel like I was being forced out of my home, you know. So those were my main concerns and questions that I had. And I do thank you
Well, I
all for the
appreciate you
time.
coming. Glad you came up.
Thank you.
Any more questions? That's it? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public that want to speak?
Any questions at all?
Feel free to
Give me a call and I can tell you kind of exactly what's going on. I understand the confusion
Okay,
and I'll tell you exactly.
okay.
We'll get straight
Make a
down.
motion to go back into regular session. Is there a second to go back into regular session? I have a motion, a second, any discussion on that? Hearing none, I'm ready to vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? We're now back in regular session. The first item is the ZTA 2-20. We've been talking about all night. Get a motion, we'll have some more discussion, and we can talk about it next.
Leon, is this a good time for you to bring up my concerns?
Yes, sir.
In your staff report, a couple of the things that really hit home with me on page 3, under residential, it says prevent encroachment of conflicting land uses on existing viable neighborhood. That's one thing that's kind of bothered me with this location. The other thing is, in most cases, different land uses are kept separate from each other, especially in rural locations. And I saw that under staff analysis, if this presents a problem, the applicant is advised that the proposed facility can be located so that it sits entirely on the large parcel to the rear of the subdivision, preserving the lots. I guess that would be my biggest concern, is using the subdivision road to access the site. And I just hate I just don't see that subdivision surviving under those circumstances. And I mean, the operation of the facility sounds great. But if it could be remote to the subdivision, isolated at the back of that huge parcel with a different access point, gosh, I would be completely comfortable with it. But looking at the tax map, am I reading this right, Lynn, that all of the road frontage on Spring Church Road is consumed with the subdivision? Is there any other access?
There is an adjacent parcel to the north of the project that is owned by a different owner.
With 5548,
Let me get my map back.
Yeah, that's been about 48.
You would have to go across other landowners in order to cut a road through there.
Yes, you have to cross parcel 48, which is owned, I believe, by a timber company, to access parcel 49, is the large parcel that is, part of this, project. Or you have to come in through, I don't know what they call the road, North Carolina. You have to access it through parcels in North Carolina, but
There are homes on those parcels. There are homes on those parcels.
yeah, their homes on those parcels.
I don't know, it seems to me that this is, from a land use standpoint, this is the thing that you just don't need to do.
I agree.
I have a real bad feeling about this precedent that we need to set. You know, the project sounds great. If it could just be remote, I mean, that's a huge parcel, 5549.
That's 200 acres.
200 acres.
Yeah, 212.
That's all.
Do you know how many acres that the
And that's kind
It's
of,
183.84 acres.
that's how I feel. The other thing I was a little disappointed in is that we really weren't given even a conceptual site plan to go by. I mean, we've got this one map in here that's a Google Earth image, but, well, that's really vague. And I think if something as important as this is the SUP process, I think we really should have a conceptual site plan to review. We really can't see how big the total site would be as far as this blue rectangle represents the building, 30,000 square foot building, but you don't know how big the storage yard, the compound would be surrounding that.
That would be it, because there is no storage.
There's no outside storage or anything.
So you're really just using that, the trucks are just backing up to that in the way that it would be, any other sort of, almost a warehouse type facility where you just have truck bays backing into it.
And that's what I'm saying, if you had a plan showing that, it would be perfectly clear. But otherwise, we just have this very vague Google Earth thing at a huge scale. And we're just hearing all this stuff verbally, we really don't have a plan to review.
When this picture that Jeff is referencing, there was like a little highlighted area where the actual gas pipeline goes through. Would you be putting like a small structure over there, or like I was a little unsure of if, are you going to situate the building so that the gas pipeline is running near the building, or?
So what would happen is it would run down parallel to the state line.
Yeah,
And then down at the site, it's, I think, usually about 1/10 of an acre. There's a pretty standard format that the pipeline company has where they've made the interconnection. And it's usually that little yard that you see that's fenced in.
so they have this little chain link fenced in area that they would have to install.
We would have a maintenance, but that's what's sort of highlighted on there. We just have a maintenance road that would go down there, but there would be a pipe that would run down and it would then go into that. It would connect to the.
So would the adjacent property owner be able to see that from their property?
Not where they are. It's all wooded. That's, then the other issue we ran into is that road, as I understand it, is not a state maintained road.
No.
So the landowner apparently doesn't have any obligation because there is no house there and nothing faces onto it.
The road, was dedicated during the subdivision process of public use, but VDOT Virginia won't take in a road until you have at least 3 houses. So typically, when you build a subdivision, they will rough the road in, it'll be gravel, and then.
Hey, man, can you speak into your mic? You can't hear anything y'all saying.
He's talking about the road was never really completely taken into the state system. And he's correct. I was explaining that during the subdivision process, the road is dedicated with subdivision plat for public use to the county. And then when the subdivision is developed, VDOT will take a road in until you have 3 houses. So typically, they'll rough the road in, and once they start building houses, then they'll go back and asphalt it. And being that no activities taking place in the subdivision on that road, the owner has never made any more improvements to the road. And it's not in the VDOT secondary system of public roads, but it has been dedicated to public use.
Been looking at it on the Google, the Piney Woods conversion plan, just without the bounds, is where the subdivision is in proximity to that block.
It looks like the building's right smack dab on top of the subdivision.
Correct.
Well, I'm sorry, but that subdivision, there's nothing out there. It's all trees. So there's no houses, there's no structures. Miss Covington's house is the only one there, and that faces out onto, that actually faces onto Spring Church Road. So there's no houses that actually face onto Piney Woods. It's like a road that basically goes into the woods.
Right, I understand it's a plat, because it's a platted subdivision on paper.
Right,
It's a
correct.
viable neighborhood. Is the point that I'm making. I understand.
Correct. I think the landowner had told us that he had given up on it as a subdivision because he never had any interest from anybody to buy it. So I think he had actually dedicated, it was going to be solar. And initially, we were going to be a little bit further down the hill off of the subdivision. But then when he said he wasn't going to use this subdivision anyway, he was going to use it for solar, then we said, well, why don't we just move up on top of the hill? Now, we can move further down the hill towards the pipeline and then just use Pineywood as a drive-through. But, he told us that he had no success in selling it as a subdivision and had no intention of selling the lots as a subdivision.
Any more discussion?
I think that it would have been helpful, obviously, if we could have had Mr. Turner here, but I know you tried to get in touch with him and you haven't been successful, so, it's hard to know what his, intentions are, because I agree with Jeff, it's a private subdivision, it has water, we have a home there, and now it's like, okay, we're gonna change our course and future land use designation is still rural residential. But if he wants to vacate the subdivision, we need to know that. Is he seriously considering, and are Covington's seriously going to consider selling and changing it? I don't feel like, we don't know what Mr. Turner, is thinking, I guess. I'm not sure, we hear about the solar, and I have no idea what that is about. Don't know what he's doing with that. So again, I think that the project is a wonderful project. I lived in Rockland for a lot of years and very familiar with the plight of Sampson and Jupiter County and trying to find different means to dispose of bulk waste there. So it sounds like you'll want an answer for that. But I'm struggling with this particular site because it's homes not only in Virginia, it's homes within North Carolina, and our land use designation is residential there. So I do think that if we were to go that route and if it got approved, I would definitely like to see it moved back. I don't know how we would address the entrance.
Yeah, so one way or the other, we'll end up buying that land anyway. That was.
You would end up buying it from Mr. Turner.
Right, so if, one way or the other, it would not be residential housing, at least that was the conversation we had, because he didn't think he could sell it as residential. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, I said,
Behind the plexiglass and so.
Right. No, I said, our intention was, to buy up those remaining parcels, because Mr. Turner indicated that he had no success in selling them as residential, and that we were willing to pay the price that he was asking for them as lots. So, sort of regardless of where we located on that site, we would have bought up the remainder of those lots so that, we weren't, it just sort of made sense to us that we didn't think that somebody else would want to move in after us. So we thought we would just buy up the remainder of the lots, because he was going to, apparently, there are a lot of solar companies that are coming in there, and they want to put solar on there. So it seemed like one way or the other, it was not going to be houses. So that's what we had offered, just to buy it, if that was, and then we were going to leave a buffer behind it so that we didn't interfere with Ms. Covington's home when she was, quiet enjoyment, or whatever however you want to phrase that. So that was, as we were going through that whole process, it didn't seem like it was a way that was going to end up as a subdivision, regardless of what we did.
That's logical. I hear you loud and clear what you're saying. I mean, I feel uncomfortable supporting this the way it's presented tonight, the SUP. Would you consider moving the facility more to the rear of the project, of the property, getting off of the road? And if you use, then you would abandon the subdivision.
Sure, we can.
Jeff, if you look at the suggested conditions, number 2, that was my second condition, was subdivision plats for lots 2 through 17, and the right-of-way dedicated to public use must be vacated in accordance with the Code of Virginia. That would do away with the subdivision, and then you did in the future run the chance of houses being constructed there, which would be in conflict with this facility.
And then if the facility were pushed off the road,
Push to the east,
exactly, then you still keep that rural character for those existing homes.
correct.
And,
Plus I had buffers, vegetative buffers, provide screening, all that is suggested conditions.
And I think I really would want to see a conceptual site plan, though, because I hear what you're saying verbally, but, pictures speaks a million words.
Sure.
And if you could offer to provide that for our next meeting, then that's something that I would really appreciate.
Okay, yeah, that would be, we can certainly do that.
All right, and do we want to, on both the ZTA 220 and the S2-920, take these up at another meeting? Let the consensus is in.
Sounds like Jeff wants to defer decisions on the 2 cases of the next meeting.
All right, then we have 3 options in the back, and we need to address one of them, or both of them, to have a motion to do just that.
I'll make a motion. I'm gonna read option 3. Lynn, make it easy for us.
What page is that?
It's on page 9 of this text.
All right, we'll get started.
I move that the planning commission defer a decision on NR3 LLC's proposed natural resource recovery, refining, and recycling facility request regarding its proposed until the planning commission meeting scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. on whatever the next,
Second Tuesday,
In February.
cut the phone off. Second Tuesday in
In February.
February.
that date. Period.
I second.
All right, the motion on the floor to defer this to February. This motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion on that motion? You know, I assume you're ready to vote. All say aye in favor. Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. And I think, Mr. Carroll, you understand what we're doing, so,
Yes, sir.
okay. Now,
February 9th will be the date of the next planning commission.
okay. Other matters?
You have a copy of the draft of the planning commission annual report for 2020.
Will they be in their packets?
It will be in your packet. I'm sorry, you get the mail, I'll get to your house.
Okay.
So we will table that to the next meeting also.
Okay, the other matter. is Draft planning commission annual report. Anything else to bring up tonight?
Don't forget about February 17th, that'll be our next, comp plan meeting.
Okay,
And I do want to apologize tonight, I can't read these new trifocals on, I can't even keep up with the lines on the paper, so that's why I'm stuttering.
I'm sorry we didn't get it, but I didn't have probably no one got that. Okay, anything else? If not, I hear a motion to adjourn. So we have a second to that. All in favor of adjourning, say aye. All we are going on, thank you.